Okay, hello, thanks for coming along. My name is Sumugan Sivanesan. I am an artist, I guess, based in Sydney, in Australia, but I've been doing a little bit of research work here, particularly around this character, Alex, who is now in Bangkok. I was here in, well, firstly I'd like to thank you for setting this up and allowing me to do this here. And I was here in May, June, earlier this year, to begin this work of research. And I was away in Europe for a couple of months, and basically on the way back I've stopped over again in Bangkok, and in that period I started working on this performance lecture. So this is still very much a work in progress, and there are some ideas in here that I guess I'm hoping to get some feedback from you about, that I'm just trying out. So I'll begin, and after I finish, we'll have a little bit of a Q&A. Okay. So, I'm going to start with the Samagra Mantham, which I'm sure is a mythology I'm not going to have to tell so many of you about. It's a popular creation myth in Hindu mythology that I heard as a child, and it recounts an unusual alliance between the feuding demigods of the Asuras and the Devas in order to churn the ocean of cosmic unconscious to procure Amrita, the nectar of immortality. Uprooting the mountain Mandrachal to use as the stirring rod, the god Vishnu, the preserver, took the form of a turtle, Kumar, to act as a pivot and bear the mountain on his back, as there is no bottom to the celestial ocean. Vasuki, the king of snakes, volunteered to be the rope and was wound around the mountain, and with the Asuras at his head and the Devas at his tail, they began to churn the ocean like one would churn milk for butter. Various marine life arose, agitated by the vigorous action, whilst herbs, plants and trees were drawn in by the centrifugal force, transforming the ocean into a tonic that sustained the toilers. The strain, however, caused Vasuki to exhale a deadly poison, Halhala, the distilled essence of all evil, which threatened to destroy all creation, which the god Shiva, who is the destroyer, was beseeched to drink. After eons of labour, out from the ocean eventually arose Varuni, the goddess of wine, her eyes rolling with intoxication, followed by Chandra, the moon, whom Shiva took to wearing his matted locks, and then with the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi, who became the consort of Vishnu. Several other treasures also emerged, such as Kamanehu, the cow that fulfills desires, you can see over there. Uchashavra, a seven-headed flying horse, over there on the left. And Airavata, or Eravan, the king of elephants, the brother of the sun and the one who knits the clouds, as well as several other celestial nymphs, gems, sacred flowers, that were all claimed by various gods and demigods. Eventually, from the swirling foam, emerged Devantri, the divine physician. Some say a premonition of scientific knowledge, bearing forth a golden pot of Amrita, the nectar of immortality. The Asuras, who had earlier been shunned by the goddess of fortune, contrived to keep the Amrita for themselves and seized the pot. As they quarrelled as to how it should be shared amongst them, Vishnu manifested as the divine enchantress, Mohini. Unable to resist her charms, the Asuras agreed to allow Mohini to distribute the Amrita amongst both themselves and the Devas. Forming into two rows, the Asuras are so besotted by Mohini that they fail to notice that she pours the potent part of the elixir for the Devas alone. However, there is one attentive Asura, Rahu, some say an incarnation of Vasuki, the king of snakes, who was being used as a rope, and he disguised himself as a Deva and sat between the sun and the moon, the sun Surya and the moon Chandra, in order to receive his share. Surya and Chandra alert Vishnu of this deception. However, the snake had already swallowed a small quantity of the nectar. Angered, Vishnu released his Sudashara chakra, his discus, and decapitated the Asura. The snake's head ascends to the skies as Rahu, and the tail, known as Ketu, falls upon the earth, forming mountains, forests and islands. However, having already imbibed the Amrita, Rahu and Ketu become immortal and are believed to wreak vengeance on the sun and the moon whenever those luminaries come near. In Vedic astronomy, Rahu and Ketu correspond other shadow planets. They're not made of matter, but they correspond to points along the trajectory of the sun and the moon as they traverse across the sky when viewed from the Earth. They are the northern and southern lunar nodes. When looking from the Earth, the sun takes a year to complete its revolution of the planet, whilst the moon takes about a month. Every month the moon will overtake the sun as they travel across the sky, and periodically, usually the moon's path will pass above or below the sun as they traverse, but periodically they will intersect and cross paths, resulting in a solar eclipse where the moon passes before the earth and the sun, or a lunar eclipse where the earth passes between the sun and the moon. And during these occurrences it appears as though the sun or the moon are being swallowed up by Rahu. In Vedic astrology, it is believed that when Surya and Chandra pass through Rahu or Ketu, it will have unsettling effects, darkening an individual's perspective and upsetting one's life path, but also churning up hidden potentials and other such ideas associated with death, rebirth, transformation and regeneration. I first encountered Alex in 2009 as a self-appointed spokesperson for 254 Tamils caught on board a small wooden cargo ship, the JLS Starry-5, who were attempting to reach Australia during the aftermath of the war in Sri Lanka. The boat was towed from where it was found floundering in international waters to the port of Merak in Indonesia by the Indonesian Navy, but at the request of the Australian Prime Minister at the time, Kevin Rudd. Alex told journalists that he was a businessman with an MBA, or an English teacher working in Jaffna, a Tamil capital of the north of Sri Lanka. And with his charisma and superior command of the English language, he quickly became a favourite amongst media in the West. Easily recognisable with his thick curly beard, and some say beset with Moses delusions, he was seized upon by the international Tamil community, who urged Alex and his people to stay on board as a political spectacle, initiating a standoff at Merak that was not resolved until over 6 months later in April, stirring a lot of regional tensions. Photographs of the standoff began to circulate and now contribute to an inventory of historicised and sometimes horrific images that produce a particular kind of Tamil subjectivity and Tamil nationalism that, being Tamil myself, I find a little troubling. However, there is one particular image from Merak that I found to be profoundly useful. It is a photograph documenting a visit by one Miss Satya Rajaratnam, Miss Satya Rajaratnam, Alex's mother, to Morocco. Described by historical anthropologist Michael Roberts as a captivating image of Alex squatting before Satya, an attractive sari-clad woman. It was arranged for behind the backs of Indonesian authorities by a journalist, Stephen Fitzpatrick, and is the first depiction of Alex clean-shaven in the media, to appear in the media. There are many images of Alex that exist online, but this is not one of them. I found a facsimile of the photograph in an archive in a library in Sydney, and for me this featureless black and white reproduction became like a Rorschach ink blot on which to project and which to reflect. The image recalls a moment when Alex's shadowy past came to light, when it was revealed that he was not Alex, a businessman with an MBA, but was rather Sanjeev, an ex-gang member from Toronto, Canada, who'd been deported to Sri Lanka after serving time while still in his teens. Regardless, or perhaps because of his youthful indiscretion, Alex, or Sanjeev, remained popular with the media. The journalist Stephen Fitzpatrick even arranged for a laptop to be brought on board the boat, cloak and dagger style, and soon Alex had set up a Facebook account, began fielding emails and interviews, and conducting tours on board of the boat on Skype. It was a brief brush with fame, in which he amassed supporters and detractors alike. Following several attempts by Indonesian authorities to arrest him, Alex decided it would be best to leave. One night in March 2010, he swam from the jail Lestari 5, jumped the harbour wall, and took a motorcycle to Jakarta. From there, a friend helped him board a flight to an island near Singapore, and after hiding out for 2 days, he boarded a twin-engine boat, along with around 50 others. They alighted on the Malaysian peninsula, and then the group trekked through the jungle for another 2 days before boarding a bus to Kuala Lumpur, after which Alex disappeared. On September 11 in 2012, last year, Alex posted the following message on Facebook. So there's still like some suspicion about your involvement in your family's involvement in people smuggling as well. I know that came up.
Well, basically that was just a desperate attempt by the Sri Lanka embassy who initiated that rumor and that suspicion, because I had a lot to say in regards to the atrocities that was taking place in Sri Lanka during the last stages of the war, and I was translating the personal events of other people on a boat. So the Sri Lankan government did see me as an enemy to their state, and they wanted to discredit all my claims, and they made desperate attempts to discredit me. And one of those attempts was to label me as a people smuggler and then accuse my brother and my family members of being people smugglers operating in Canada. And their bogus lies were actually exposed when my family did approach the Canadian authorities and questioned if they had a warrant out for their arrest or if there was any suspicion of their involvement in people smuggling, and there was nothing. So my family's name was cleared, and basically even the UNHCR thing had told me that we recognize that the claims made by the Sri Lankan government are not credible and have no reliable evidence to support it. So all I can say to the Sri Lankan government is, well, this is how they do, this is how they operate, this is how they operate in regards to putting people under suspicion and giving them false accusations and labels. The Sri Lankan government has labeled me the deputy leader of the Canadian Capital Network, which has very bad in regards to my application to Canada. So, it's accusations like this that really gave me a bad name, but what can I do yet? Continue to fight it and struggle for my freedom,
Yeah, of course. I received an unexpected phone call soon after I arrived in Bangkok. I tell Sanjeev I've been in the city for 2 days, and he tells me he's been living here for almost 2 years, but I would have seen more of the city than he has. I laugh, and we arrange to meet downtown the next day. The Swan Flu Immigration Bureau is located in central Bangkok, behind the broad street that serves as an embassy avenue. The International Detention Centre is housed within this compound, off a bustling street lined with food vendors and market stalls that swells with office workers and public servants over lunch. In the detention centre, meals consist of thin soup and rice. Most visitors bring bags bulging with supplies such as spices, biscuits and fresh fruit to supplement the detainees' diet. Sanjeev tells me that the worst thing about detention is the boredom. There are no social services, diversional therapy or education projects, and the idleness erodes his manhood. His wife and children are refugees elsewhere, and he is powerless to protect or support them. His children are growing up, including a son that he has never met. Resettlement can be a frustrating, slow and bureaucratic process. He indicates there are those in detention that have remained there for more than a decade. His life is also on hold, and the years pass by. Although born into a Hindu family, Sanjeev discovered that his heart belonged to Jesus after his initial stint in a Canadian prison. And he draws on his faith to reason his circumstances and to pull through. Given that his current predicament is at the behest of the Kingdom of Thailand, a state that shares with Sri Lanka a culture of Buddhist nationalism, I imagine that his situation has been much more aligned with a Buddhist notion of hell, a naraka, a hell of worldly existence that might yet be overcome with persistence and mental training. Sanjeev and I meet several times over that fortnight. Once he recalls a visit from US officials asking about his attempts to enter. When he denies doing anything of the sort, the officials are pressing with records of the person bearing his documents arriving on a flight. They give a date in 2010 when Sanjeev was back in Merak talking to the media. When Sanjeev boarded the KMJ Lestari 5 in Malaysia in 2009, the smuggling agents took his passport. It's also possible they sold it on to another potential migrant, one that would have resembled him, Sanjeev's double, the other Alex. Usually before asylum seekers arrive in a state that is their desired destination, they will destroy their documents. The other Alex did not. If he did not have a valid visa and was rejected by the US, then he would have been deported back to the country that issued his passport, Sri Lanka. In March 2010, Sanjeev was at the height of his notoriety, and the government of Sri Lanka were making very aggressive allegations against him. Despite denials by Sri Lankan officials, there have been consistent reports of asylum seekers returning to Sri Lanka, where they are imprisoned, tortured, and coerced into signing confessions. Whatever befell the other Alex would have surely been intended for Sanjeev. I first came to befriend Alex on Facebook. And I did this by simply submitting a friend request, which he accepted. And I maintained this friendship by not unsubscribing to his updates. On Facebook, friendship is a concept by which the social media giant collates an expanding and interconnected database of personal information and behaviour patterns for profit and manipulation. Here, the accumulation of friends is not only narcissistic, but perhaps even predatory. I've now come to know Sanjeev face to face after his internet access was revoked, and there are still many twists in his story and in his history. So our friendship is forged on his incarceration. Would we be friends if he was outside? Would we have ever met? Our friendship is founded in a space where his current situation and my political interests intersect, alluding to a space beyond where we may yet have nothing in common. So ours is a restricted and conditional friendship, uneven and some would even say ill-advised. If Sanjeev's appeal for resettlement fails, it is possible that the UN will revoke his refugee status and return him to Sri Lanka, where his safety cannot be assured. Would you send a friend to his death? It seems that ultimately, either by freedom or death, our friendship is doomed. Oh friends, there is no friend. When I visit Sanjeev, we talk about his dilemma, and it occurs to me that images of him, of his simulacrum, Alex, remain in the public sphere while he remains fixed, and continue to circulate. With Sanjeev withdrawn from the world at large and reliant on his spiritual imagery, might Alex then be harnessed in pursuit of our common politics of mobility? So when I look at the imagery of the Sumatra Manthan, for me it's obviously a picture of labour relations, of an unequal distribution of wealth, technology and access to knowledge that has been politically manipulated, maintained and exploited since time immemorial. If I was better versed in this kind of mythology, I'd attempt a rewriting of it, whereupon realising their common skills and working conditions and the potential of their cooperative efforts, the Asuras and the Devas would form a somewhat unholy alliance, and following the revolutionary motion of their labours, when they churn with the rope, they would usurp the divine Godhead, storm heaven, so to speak, to collectively improve their material conditions and future prospects, whilst attaining immortal powers. But of course this is also just a fantasy. However, if we look into history, we might also glimpse an alternative picture of social arrangements. When Alex and his people began their standoff in Merak, another standoff was simultaneously underway by another group of Tamils and at another Indonesian port, this time at Bintan, but this time also on board an Australian customs ship, the Oceanic Viking. The 78 Tamils on board the Oceanic Viking also refused to disembark and began a hunger strike, hoping to broker a deal that assured their resettlement. This action invariably caused frictions between the refugees and the maritime workers, churning relations between Indonesia, Australia and Sri Lanka. However, in an unexpected act of solidarity, the Australian Council of Trade Unions mounted a campaign calling on all sides of politics to show leadership on human issues and bring asylum seekers to Australia. And in a further gesture of mutual recognition, the Maritime Union of Australia, whose members worked on board the Oceanic Viking, collected $10,000 to be presented to the refugees to aid their resettlement. So this might just be a minor detail in a recent historical moment, but they're not insignificant gestures. In recognising the commonality of their labour potential, a national body of workers extends themselves towards the emaciated and inert bodies of the nationless asylum seekers. In doing so, they expand the sphere of sociability beyond the enclosures of the state to form a political community that calls on the authority of public opinion and also creates a spark to expand the national imaginary. However, this story is a long way from reaching any just or moral conclusion. Many of those on board the Oceanic Viking and the JL Astari 5 are still floundering in detention in Indonesia, in Thailand, and Australia, and even Romania. Recently, a refugee known as Sassi, the translator for those on board the Oceanic Viking, and who's been detained in Melbourne since 2010, wrote a letter to the Department of Immigration in Australia, begging for a mercy killing. His lawyer stated he didn't receive a response. Such an act might be dismissed as a publicity stunt, but it also illustrates how such scenes of crisis in the developed world have become so common that they simply fade into the background. The episodes I've described recall many gestures of friendships, both across the brow and behind the backs of authorities, and perhaps over time will be read in the details of an ongoing epic struggle, one that still churns across the oceans, prompting a change in an expanded social imaginary that might yet eclipse the institutions of a national fantasy. Thanks.